Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and the best films coming to theaters and streaming online. You okay, Will?
I'm fine. Why do you ask?
I don't know. You seem like you're upset about something.
I'm not upset about anything. I'm happy to be here.
Am I just reading into that?
I think so.
Okay, well, I apologize. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Agroni, film editor for the Young Folks. Will, are you okay?
I'm perfectly fine.
I guess I'm having a bit of an out-of-body experience today. I don't know.
I guess so, yeah.
It's just when I'm looking at you, it's like you're rotoscoped, and it's like you're kind of like you're animated.
We're doing an Apollo 10 half thing. I thought we were doing an everything everywhere at once thing.
Oh, like a multiverse thing.
Yeah.
Oh, like I don't recognize you. Just like you're like Will, but you're a little different. You're like the version of Will who does not like doing the podcast.
I don't know what you're talking about, but we could also make this a Morbius thing, saying you
didn't watch Morbius. You refused.
Well, it's not that I refuse.
You stood up for
yourself. To review everything everywhere at once instead because I felt that was a more interesting film to cover.
Okay.
And I had no interest in seeing Morbius, but I said I would see Morbius if you felt inclined.
I mean, I saw it.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk about it someday because it's...
Well...
Can I tell you something about Morbius? The new...
If you want.
In association with Marvel Sony movie that's sort of supposed to be connected in a weird way to the Spider-Man movies, but also Venom?
Sure.
I don't think it's as bad as people are saying.
It just seems pretty mediocre.
Yeah, but like people are just sort of saying like it's not watchable and it's like one of the worst movies. No, it's not. It's not that bad. It's okay. It's just pretty whatever. And here's my other thing though. Where you're missing out on an opportunity. I think for the first time on the show, we would have been able to go through Jared Leto's filmography.
Why would we want to do that?
Because we never do it because he's always like the supporting actor. Right?
Yes.
With House of Gucci, with The Little Things, I know we weren't doing the show back then, but with Dallas Buyers Club. Like, we're never kind of like digging into the whole Jared Leto of it all. Suicide Squad, we didn't. Yep. It was like the last thing we talked about was Jared Leto's Joker. This would have been an opportunity to be like, hey, let's do a little bit of like a colonoscopy on the Jared Leto experience. And we're missing out on that.
I guess. I don't know. I could do without more Jared Leto in my life personally.
I agree, but I'm still kind of fascinated by his career and his general approach to acting. I mean, he's a method actor who's not good at acting. I mean, is that what it is?
I find it fascinating in some respects. Like, I think it was really fascinating in House of Gucci because I feel like that was a movie where he is not giving a good performance, but he's giving the performance that the movie wants. And he's also kind of perfectly cast, but he's also horribly cast at the same time. And it's this weird push and pull where he's like at once being the best and worst thing about that movie. And so like I think that is fascinating. But in Morbius, he looks like he's just miscast.
He doesn't care in the movie. He's just like, it's his most understated performance. It's one of his better performances. Like it's funny, I think. I don't think you would agree though. I feel like you would have the opposite opinion if you saw it, but
maybe. I don't know. I mean,
we are.
I feel like, well, I mean, you say he doesn't care, but I feel like he maybe cares too much. Like
as an actor, I'm saying he doesn't care in this movie. Morbius.
Oh, you mean like you're saying like he doesn't care, he's going to do whatever he wants sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm not talking about generally as an actor. No. I would not go that far.
But
yeah. We are going to talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once, which a lot of people are saying like this is one of the best movies of the year so far. It's a bit of a landmark film in certain ways. We're going to get into it. But real quick, Will, I want to go through, here are all the movies that we could have talked about. We're not going to get to them, but I just want to like cover the scope of what movies like releases were like this past week. Because it was kind of insane. We had Nitram.
I wanted to see that.
Say again?
I wanted to see that film.
I wanted to see it too. It's the new Justin Kurzel film. That came out. Also Moonshot, which I don't think is going to be any good, but like that's that one with Cole Sprouse and Lana Condor on HBO Max.
I heard it's all right.
There was something called Night's End, which I don't know if you heard about that one. It's just like a little horror movie.
Or Nights.
Night with an N, no K.
Okay.
Yeah. There was Better Nate Than Ever, on Disney Plus, which
I
is
thought that
based,
came
of
out
course.
before.
I mean, I thought it came out this past week.
I have no idea. This movie
Either
doesn't
way.
exist, so it could never come out. That's the paradox.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a musical. It's about Nate Ashton, Will Ashton's brother. That's
Sure,
true.
Put him on blast. If he's listening, hey, Nate.
There was something called See You Then, which, I know nothing about, but I just saw that it was another movie that came out this week. I have nothing to say. There was You Won't Be Alone. The
I saw
Sundance.
that one. You saw that one too.
Yeah, we both saw it. We're not going to talk about it. I didn't think it was very good.
I thought it was all right.
Very experimental film. Easy to appreciate on some level.
Existential, I think you mean.
Existential? Sure, yeah, we can say that. And then The Bubble. Judd Apatow's new film.
I have also seen that.
I saw the first 30 minutes and I turned it off because I was
tapped out.
Self-care. I was like, you know what? I don't want to keep watching this.
Sure.
And it's funny because there were two Netflix movies out this week by two well-known filmmakers, and this was like the big one because it has a big cast, and then the other one, Napolitan and a Half, we are actually talking about because it's worth talking about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there were two movies that they released. One that they cared about, and one that they basically dumped unceremoniously onto their service. Well,
also there was like one or two other Netflix or like films that came out, but they do that every week. Weekend? It feels like they have so much stuff.
I guess. I mean, the big thing before was the new season of Bridgerton, I think.
Sure. Well, I'm getting into shows and all that, but with The Bubble, I mean, this was supposed to be like big ensemble. Karen Gillan, Leslie Mann, of course, the wife of Judd Apatow. Keegan Michael Key, and then Pedro Pascal, and it's like a COVID movie, I guess. They're trying to film a blockbuster while being in a COVID bubble. Like everybody wants to see that.
It's poking fun at the making of the most recent and still upcoming Jurassic World movie.
Yeah, which I like the concept. I'll go that far.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about Corey because I think Corey was either watching it now because that movie's like 3 hours. It feels like 3 hours. It's actually 2 hours, but he was watching it, and I was saying that you tapped out because you're a wimp. You didn't want to finish the movie.
100%.
And he said that he'd be willing to join me for a bonus discussion of that film.
Mamma Mia, here we go again.
But the one I wanted to discuss.
I'm about to say it. The one movie that I missed that I actually do have an interest in seeing is RRR, or Triple R.
Yeah, which came out not this weekend, but last weekend. But it seems like the word of mouth is spreading. That's certainly how I found out about the film.
Sure. Big Bollywood release.
Yeah, a Hindi film that is really seeming to make an impression in the U.S. In a major way, more so than most Hindi or Bollywood films do.
It's playing in theaters all over this area. And I know people who watch this film, critics who are like, I cried while watching this. And I'm like, wow, okay.
I wasn't that emotional, but it was just, it's funny to see this and Everything Everywhere All at Once on the same week. Because it's like, we see so many movies now, certainly from a blockbuster standpoint, where it's just like, seems like, it's algorithm dictating what's happening. It doesn't seem like filmmakers are really pushing the envelope here. It seems like, and we see two films from prominent filmmakers just being dumped on the streaming services with little to no fanfare. And you're like, what's really going on? Is cinema dead? And you watch a movie like that, and you watch a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once, and you're just like, cinema, it's alive, man.
Yeah, it's not dead. It's taking a little nap.
Well, you just got to find it. I mean, you may not see it in a film like Morbius, though I haven't seen it, so I can't judge it too harshly.
Yeah, for all you'd be like, oh, that's even better than RRR and Everything Everywhere All at Once combined.
But I genuinely want you to watch RRR if you can make the time and feel comfortable going to a theater to see it, because it is absolutely worth the theatrical experience.
For 3 hours, Wash.
It's a Bollywood film. It is 3 hours. And I've never seen a Bollywood
film in theaters. No, I do not count Aladdin. People who think Aladdin is Bollywood need to get their eyes checked.
I mean, I was going to say the closest I've come to seeing a Bollywood film or a Bollywood film in theaters was probably Slumdog Millionaire, which I don't qualify as.
I don't count that as Bollywood.
But it has Bollywood influence, so that's about as close as I've come. to. I'm not qualifying as a Bollywood film. I'm saying that's the closest I have come to a Bollywood film in my lifetime, in my theatrical going experiences in this one and only life I have. So,
fair enough, I
guess. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you and our listeners can see RRR, 100% worth the time, money to see it.
And like we said before, so many movies out, so many choices. April's going to be a big old month, but it's kind of amazing that we are going to talk about this movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is such a big movie, and it's hitting hard. I haven't seen the trailer for this movie, Washington, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I've heard that the trailer is terrific. Like,
very good trailer,
a standout trailer. It gets you pumped for the movie, and I have the trailer right here, and I think I want to watch it for the first time with you right now, Washington.
Sure,
you down?
Okay, if you want,
I think that could be fun. So
I mean, I've seen the trailer.
I know, but you get to see me seeing the trailer, right?
Okay, I see.
And the listeners get to.
I am getting a trailer reaction against my will right now.
Yeah, not against your will. You could. Hey, look, you can bow at any time. But
I'm joking.
Here is Everything Everywhere All at Once. The trailer. Here we go.
Mrs. Wang. Mrs. Wang, are you with us?
I am paying attention.
Now, you may only see a pile of receipts, but I see a story. I can see where this story is going. It does not look good.
What's happening?
I'm not your husband. I'm another version of him from another universe. I'm here because we need your help.
Very busy today. No time to help you.
Across the multiverse, I've seen thousands of Evelyns. You can access all of their memories, their emotions, even their skills. There's a great evil spreading throughout the many verses. And you may be your only chance of stopping it.
Don't make me fight you. I am really good.
I don't believe you.
I'm going to say this, okay? Well, and maybe you're going to find this to be hyperbolic. I think this is one of the most important films to have come out in years. It's important that this movie came out.
All right.
And what I mean by that is that you kind of touched on it earlier. We needed this. We needed a budget movie, like a movie's budget is like looks bigger than it is. This is a $25 million movie.
Oh yeah, I mean that's easily one of the most impressive things about this movie. Is that I mean I think they shot it also in like I think 35 days or something like.
I don't doubt
the
it.
budget and the production for this film are insane. Like I heard. Not confirmed, but I had heard that apparently did like 70 shots a day, or at least like one of the days they had like 70 shots they had. And it was just a matter of them being so pragmatic as directors. They're just like, we know what we want. We know how we're going to get in the edit. We're just going to like get one or two takes, moving on to the next scene, next set.
And it's A24 and they trusted them, right? They weren't like, oh, hey, you need another $50 million to go back and change like these 40 minutes. And none of that.
And I mean, on top of all that, this was made during the pandemic. Like this was shot in 2011, which is even more mind-boggling.
I can't believe it. I mean, I do kind of believe it because the cast is pretty contained, right?
Oh, for sure. But I mean, like the number of sets, the number of different multiverses, the number of costumes, the number
in a world where things are fair, this would win the Oscar for production design by a mile.
Oh yeah, and I mean like. I'm not a big fan of like flashy editing in general, but this deserves an editing nomination 100%.
Yeah, maybe a win. I mean, the year is young, right?
I don't think this will get Oscar consideration, but I hope it does. I hope they at least consider it.
If they had, which is confusing to me because they should not have released this in March. They should have released this in like July or August, but they keep doing this. They released X already earlier this month. It's like they're just dumping everything in 1 month.
Yeah, I mean, as far as releasing it this month. I think it's such a kooky, zany film that I can understand that like they want to release it early before the summer movie season, so they don't want it to get overshadowed. But they tend to release their movies that like have a clear audience that they know people will show up for, but maybe aren't like a confident sell around this time, because like they know like even though this I think deserves to be considered for award consideration, I don't think it's a safe bet. It's not something that the Academy is going to guarantee love.
Critics will.
What was that?
It's critics will. Yes,
Oh,
I think it's gonna go through that circuit,
But,
just destroying very likely.
But I think
Depending
they
on
were
what else
smart.
comes out this year.
Yeah, I think they were smart though. I mean, I've been vocally very critical about a lot of things that A24 does. I do like them as a company. I like the movies they produce. I'm glad they're around. I'm glad they're supporting indie film the way they are. I think they have botched a number of releases in the past, including the last few months. But I think with this one, they were smart. I think they knew that this was like the most South by Southwest movie to ever exist. They premiered at South by Southwest, got the incredible word of mouth and reviews from that film, and then released it shortly thereafter in a kind of gradual word of mouth way where they released it in some small select cities, got the word and buzz growing, and now it's going to be going wide by the time we're talking about it in this episode. And I mean, people that may otherwise have ignored this film or forgotten about it are actually going to probably come up and see it, I hope. Yeah. And I think was a smart play.
I think that was a smart play too. And it carries on the A24 tradition where, yes, I agree with you. I'll criticize A24 any day, but at the same time, A24 tends to make some of my favorite films every year, right? So like my favorite film, or my second favorite film of 2020, that was Minari, right? My favorite film of 2019 was The Last Black Man in San Francisco. My favorite film of 2018 was Eighth Grade. So 2 years in a row, my favorite films were A24. And then my second favorite film in 2020 was that. Last year, 2021, Red Rocket, that was A24, right? So I'm clearly like, when it comes to A24, I tend to really love that level of films, I guess. But it's funny because, I mean, do you know their highest grossing films ever? Can you guess?
Spring Breakers is certainly up there.
No.
Well, it was at one point, right?
Maybe at one point, but it's not in the top 5.
Okay. Well, I know it's not Under the Silver Lake.
Nope. I'm curious if you're going to get get any in the top 5. One more guess.
Let's see. Well, that was an actual guess. That one was a joke answer.
Fine. You can get 2 guesses. 2 more guesses.
Spring Breakers was an actual guess. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Like, what's like?
You got this.
What's a blockbuster of theirs that they've actually done, and like a major release? I feel like Spring Breakers was one that.
If it was on me, I would have only guessed one of these. I'll give you that. Maybe
Florida
2.
Project?
Nope.
Oh.
Last guess. I believe in you. Sort of.
Can I look at a list of A24 films?
Nope.
Okay.
You might see the budget accidentally. We got to be more careful.
The budget or the box office?
The box office. That's what I meant.
Was Eighth Grade?
No. Okay. Number 5, Midsummer. It made $47 million.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Number 4, Uncut Gems. It made $50 million.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that was A24. Yeah.
Moonlight, number 3.
Oh, of course, yeah.
$65 million. This one I wouldn't have guessed. I would have guessed Moonlight. I would have guessed Uncut Gems. I would not have guessed Lady Bird. That made $79 million.
Yeah,
I didn't know it made
I remember
that much.
That was, yeah, now you mention it, that was... I always forget that these films are A24 films. I think they're like Focus or something. So.
No. And then the number 1, and this is the other one I would have guessed, although I don't know if I would have guessed it was the number 1, but it does make sense in retrospect. Hereditary.
Okay.
81 million. So
yeah. Okay.
Wild.
Those none of those are like outliners or like I can't believe that was a huge hit. But I can get what you're saying where it's like
sure. Let's talk about the Daniels.
Yeah, sure.
We should talk about those guys.
Yeah,
our buddies.
Turned down for what?
Dan Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. So these guys are the mad geniuses behind a movie called Swiss Army Man, which you and I bonded over that year. I want to say we both enjoyed that one quite a bit.
I was on your previous podcast, and I think I defended that as a film either the year or the summer. I forget which, and I made my case for it. And that remained my favorite film of 2016.
You didn't defend it to me. I was on your side, right?
I forget. I had to defend it to somebody.
I loved that film. I like still listen to the soundtrack. I do not remember ever trashing it whatsoever.
No, you weren't trashing it. It was a case for like either the film of the year or the summer, and then we had to like each make a case. It was like,
maybe like our best and our favorite, whatever. I think Sing Street was the one for me that year.
I think you were making the case for Sing Street. I was making a case for Swiss Army Man. I forget what the other two were.
Swiss Army Man was like, I remember really though, like going to bat for that one in a similar way because of how it was such a blessed movie in terms of what it said about, you know, the uncomfortability of being a human being and, you know, all of the weird foibles of society. And it was just a beautiful movie.
Absolutely.
And this is definitely in that same spirit.
Yeah. And I still see people being weirdly sort of antagonistic towards that film, but I hope the success and the critical acclaim of Everything Everywhere at Once helps people to reconsider, reevaluate, or actually see that film, because I really do think, like, I mean, people got hung up on the whole like farting corpse thing, but beyond the goofiness of the core premise, it is really a beautiful story about friendship and self-identity and, you know, feeling comfortable in your own self, but also learning your own social failures and own social ineptitude. And also for a lot of men realizing that like the fantasy that they create in their head is not true to reality when it comes to social interactions. And yeah, it's a really beautiful, complex film. And I think that it deserves a lot more credit than I think it had received at the time of its release.
Absolutely. Yeah, we totally agree there. Now, their first film, feature film that they ever did, because they did a short film in 2014, but their first feature film was Swiss Army Man, which they directed and wrote. They did another short film that same year called Possibilia. Huh?
Okay, I thought you were talking about Interesting Ball. Interesting
Ball was the 2014 one?
Okay, I think so, yeah.
The short one, yeah. Possibility was 2016. And then they went away for a while. That was 6 years ago. Daniel Scheinert made The Death of Dick Long, which he directed but did not write, which I thought was an okay movie. Not one that I thought was a bit weird in ways I didn't appreciate as much.
It's grown on me. It didn't hit me in the same way that Swiss Army Man did or this film did, but I really appreciate the film's commitment to its concept and how willing it is to be pretty dark and morose while also being funny and kind of even touching in a weird way. So it's a pretty good film, but I feel like it didn't hit the same stride as the films that these two have made together.
Absolutely. They've done a lot of stuff together on the TV side. They've done stuff for shows like Children's Hospital. Dan Kwan did an episode of Legion. They also did an episode of Awkwafina's Nora from Queens.
I think they did a couple of that, right?
A couple of what?
From Nora from Queens.
They might have, very possibly. And I think Awkwafina was actually going to be in this movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once at one point, but then was recast, which I think was for the best.
Oh, yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah, I do remember that.
They also have done a lot of music videos, a lot of great music videos. A lot of them for Manchester Orchestra, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because Manchester Orchestra does the soundtrack for Swiss Army Man. But then they also have done some like iconic ones. They did Simple Song for the Shins in 2012. They did Turn Down for What, which is like, people really know that one. That's a terrific music video.
That's their calling card one, yeah.
Say again?
That was their calling card, I think. That was like kind of what got them more prolific work and probably what led to them doing something like Swiss Army Man.
Yeah, and I mean, they've worked with Tenacious D, they worked with Passion Pit, Foster the People. These guys certainly have built a reputation for being surreal filmmakers, for being unpredictable, but also being heartwarming. And I think that is a nice way to encapsulate Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is such a fascinating movie in the sense that it's coming out a month or two before this big Marvel blockbuster called Doctor Strange's Multiverse of Madness, which is going to like feature prominently the multiverse in superhero films. We're sort of entering that part of superhero cinema where now we're going to start getting into like alternate realities and doing all this stuff. And this movie is amazing because it is sort of preempting, I think, that whole like phase we're about to go into, where I'm sure you and I are going to have a bit of a time, you know, talking about the Marvel movies this year. And they just kind of come in preemptively with, I think, one of the best multiverse pieces of storytelling ever put to film. Right? Like,
well, yeah. And yeah, I mean, in that I think that's also the other reason why they had to release this in the spring, because if they release this in the summer and even the fall, people would just endlessly compare it to Doctor Strange, and I think
now
they just wanted to stand on its own terms.
Yeah. Now they're going to endlessly compare Doctor Strange to everything everywhere all at once. But that's the thing. Critics are going to. That's a good strategy. Critics are going to watch Doctor Strange and just be like, yeah, the multiverse, been there, seen that done better. I have a feeling. Because as we said, the critics are all over this thing. They love it. But what about us? So I think it's clear that we love it. But anyway, this movie mostly centers around a woman named Evelyn Wang. She owns a laundromat that's kind of struggling with her husband, Waymond. Evelyn is played by Michelle Yeoh, the legendary Michelle Yeoh. And her husband, Waymond, is played by Huy Quan. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that close to accurately. Now, one thing about Michelle Yeoh, of course, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, among many, many, many incredible films. I think the first time I ever saw her in a movie was Tomorrow Never Dies. She was one of the main characters in that James Bond movie, which was a bit of an awakening for me, I want to say, in terms of like the James Bond movies, because that was the first one I saw in theaters. And she has been in a lot of incredible martial arts films, like throughout the 90s. And I want to say, what was her last movie that came out? I know she was in Shang-Chi, but I'm thinking more of like a bigger movie. Like I guess she was in Last Christmas and Crazy Rich Asians. But
yeah, I was gonna say that's probably her most famous one of late, outside of Shang-Chi.
Oh, Gunpowder Milkshake. That was the other one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she was in that. She's going to be in the Avatar sequels, so we'll see her We'll see her again pretty soon.
Why not?
Yeah. Yeah, Michelle Yeoh, she's a legend of the cinema. And then Huy Quan, I don't know if you picked up on who this guy was when you saw the trailer. I watched the entire movie and I was just like, he looks familiar, and his voice is so familiar. And it wasn't until right after I saw his name and I was like, that name is familiar. And I had to look it up and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Short Round from Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes, and also, well, I don't think he's in Raiders. Right?
Temple of Doom, excuse me.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's only in Temple, I think. But he's also in the Goonies, and he's been
which I guess technically I saw the Goonies before I saw Temple of Doom. Now that I think about it,
yeah, but he's been sort of out of the game for a little bit. I think he's done some like short films, and like I think he did another indie last year. But
Finding Ohana, was his last movie.
But I think he's been like kind of semi-retired for like a decade or two before this movie.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he was not acting for about 20 years, and he was certainly more active in the 80s and 90s, and he's back now, and I think wonderfully so, because he just what a well cast film. Especially, I mentioned this earlier. I think Stephanie Hsu, who comes in as Joy, I'm so glad they got her, and it's not Awkwafina, because I just think that she's brilliant in this. And I mean, had you seen her in anything beforehand? Because I couldn't place any of her roles. I had to look up, but I didn't really see anything. She does show up in Shang-Chi, apparently, but I don't remember her in it.
I didn't recognize her from anything specific, but I might have seen something that she's been in the past and just don't remember.
The only thing I have seen her in TV, and that was about it. Or like recognize her. She has like kind of a presence in she was introduced in the 3rd season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. But she's a character in that, like one of the love interests for the Joel character in that show. And she's also in Awkwafina, is Nora from Queens. A couple episodes of that show. So it's full circle.
Yeah. Okay.
So there you go. Yeah. We also have Jamie Lee Curtis, who, she left the set for Halloween and Halloween Kills.
Yeah.
She's like, all right, time to get to work.
Yeah. I mean, she seems to be probably the one that's most emboldened by doing this film outside of Huy Quan, in terms of just like allowing herself to kind of play against her image, do things that she probably hasn't been able to do outside the Halloween franchise for years. And she takes it all in stride. I mean, I don't know what it was like making the film, or like what like her process of getting into it was, but like on screen, she seems to be having an absolute ball making this movie.
Yeah, I genuinely, when she showed up in the IRS building, which I had no idea was going to be our main location for an entire movie. What a movie. It's just like I remember at one point I was just like, we're still on this building? What am I watching? But she shows up and I'm like, that looks exactly like Jamie Lee Curtis. Is that really her? Is this like a main character? What am I watching right now? She's going to be in, of course, the last Halloween movie of that trilogy, Halloween Ends, I think it's called. And then her next big feature is going to be coming out next year, a movie called Borderlands, based on the video game. That's the one that Eli Roth directed, and I think he co-wrote, which I assume, Will, you have no like foundation for Borderlands, that franchise or anything, but that could be a big movie.
No, Borderlands I know a little bit more than most video games.
Oh, okay, interesting.
I haven't played it, but I mean, I'm familiar with the game, the concept, and the world.
Okay.
But you're forgetting one big actor who's in this film.
A big actor who's in this film?
Yeah, James Hong, who plays the grandfather.
Oh, yes. Gong Gong. And we have seen James Hong in countless movies.
Over 400 or 500 credits on IMDb, I think.
It is a prolific filmography. I think he was like making movies in like the 50s. Right.
Yes.
Chinese films. And I think he also, I'm trying to think of like some recent stuff, because I think my introduction to him was probably through TV, because he was in a Zorro show. He was in Jackie Chan Adventures. He was one of the voices in that. He was in a lot of shows we were in growing up. Like he's a prolific person.
Oh,
Teen Titans, which I know you and I have been swapping memes about that show.
Yes.
The original.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most legendary Asian American actors in Hollywood ever to work in the business, and I was so elated because he was the one I didn't know was going to be in the film. I mean, I know he's in the trailer,
up, I was like,
yeah, it was just like, nice. And then when I found out he would be like a prominent part, like not just like a like brief 1 or 2 scene cameo sort of thing, I was so elated.
Absolutely. Prolific actor. It's a prolific cast all around. So the plot of this movie, it's hard to describe like what this movie is. And I think to sum it up, essentially, like we already said, multiverse movie, but Evelyn, who's running this like laundromat, they're getting audited by the IRS. And then all of a sudden, without warning, Evelyn gets a visit from her husband, who's been possessed by an alternate version of her husband from another universe. And so she finds out that there are ways to like channel her other selves from other universes. And for some reason, she is like the hope to saving the multiverse from this like interdimensional demon that can control sort of like people across the universes and use their skills at any time. And it's a hero's journey sort of.
Well, this movie, I mean, it runs the gamut in terms of inspiration, but I think one of the more inspired things about it is that it's following the broad narrative archetype of the first Matrix film.
Yes.
And the idea of like, you're kind of the one, like you, a seemingly mild-mannered person is actually someone of great power and significance for saving the universe. But it's the opposite, where it's not like Neo, where he is like the greatest person that has to untap his true potential. It's like she is the worst version of herself to exist in the whole universe, and she's
so
like
the
this
movie
sort of
implies, but I don't think you can say it's definitive.
Well, that's what.
Yeah,
I think that's what the Huy Quan's character says directly, right? That's why I'm saying.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not. I don't think that's the point of view of the movie necessarily. I think it's something that gets
but what
brought
I'm saying is that it's like
it's a theory.
No, but what I'm saying is that like she's sort of like this. She's at her lowest point, and like she's like the one who has never reached her full potential and never become like able to take her trauma or any particular life experience in a way that has been fully utilized, or taking a skill that's like proven to be more substantial than any other version of herself. And so like at this low point, like she can untap all this potential and become like her truest self through this, sort of wild and out MacGuffin type thing, plot device. And that's, I think, a really inspired flip on the Matrix hero's journey archetype story. It's
the Matrix by way of Wong Kar-wai. That's how I would describe it. Because
sure, I mean, Wong Kar-wai is certainly a major influence, and there's even a segment of the film, without giving too much away, that's very reminiscent of Wong Kar-wai and In the Mood for Love, and even recreating some of those shots along from some shots from what's the one like with the motorcycle and stuff. It's one of the ones of his I haven't seen. But like, yeah, I mean, certainly, I mean, Wong Kar-wai, Jodorowsky is a major influence on this film. Malick's a major influence. As we mentioned, the Wachowskis are a major influence. Michel Gondry is a major influence on this film.
Yeah, and just to keep the scope too, it's like it's not just ripping from those movies. Like,
well, no, yeah, that's what I'm gonna. Yeah,
it's like taking the sentimentality of like something like In the Mood for Love, or some of even the more recent like Asian American experience films, immigrant family films that you can take from all across the spectrum, and infusing that with the not blockbuster but the high concept blockbuster cinema that you get from like the Wachowskis, that you get from anime, that you get from all these like pieces from mostly Eastern sort of filmmaking. I want to say Eastern because I think like there's not a lot that's like Western about this because it is so sporadic. I guess you could say with Malick, Terrence Malick, you have a little bit of that, but it's not like this movie is a mosaic, right? It's all over the place, but in a pretty coherent way.
Well, that's what I was going to build up to, which is that it's like, I think I said before, like a sort of like a stew of all these different cinematic influences. It's taken all these different things that have been sort of borrowed from other filmmakers or stylistically are attuned to other filmmakers, also like Edgar Wright, particularly like Scott Pilgrim. There's certainly that feel and aesthetic to a lot of this, and Jackie Chan has been a major influence in this film, to the point where I believe Jackie Chan was the first choice for the character of Evelyn before it was going to be a woman. I think they just wanted to make a vehicle for Jackie Chan, and they were figuring out what the story should be, and it kind of, I think in their words, they said it kind of opened up in a bigger, more meaningful way. But yeah, it's taking all of these different filmmakers, different influences, and it's boiling down into like something that's can seem on its face very messy and sort of chaotic, but because it's infused with these sensibilities that are very similar and personal to are very attuned to the influences of our main directors here, it feels so much more personal and unique in a way that I feel is like Quentin Tarantino, in that like his movies I think they've been described sort of like cinematic mixtapes, in that like they take all these different things, but they are undeniably a Quentin Tarantino experience. Like,
I would agree, but only I do want to like make it super clear, because like I think you're saying this, but like to make it clear to the listeners, it's like there is like the Daniels are in this, and I know you're saying that.
Yeah,
it's like there's a way of their filmmaking in the same way that Tarantino has his signatures, but it does get that like reputation of being like so much homage, so much tribute. But then when you really appreciate a Tarantino film, you see that like there are certain things about him that are very original, and it's like that something's Tarantino when you see it, and that is happening here with the Daniels. They have there are certain things that they do with action scenes where like characters will do things and put things up other things that is very Death of Dick Long. That's very Swiss Army Man. That's very like, let's do weird things with our bodies, is kind of their shtick, and it works here. Yeah. Although I don't know if everybody would agree.
I'm only equating this to Tarantino in a sense that like, I feel like only Tarantino in a broad populist sort of way has really captured that to American audiences in a way where it's like so clearly honing and borrowing from other filmmakers, but making something that is so signature and unique to them that it doesn't feel like it's like pickpocketing from all these filmmakers. It feels like it's being infused and inspired by them, but making something that is so personal and unique and only singular to them in a way that is ultimately greater because of that. Like it and also Brad Bird too, and for reasons I can't get into without spoiling anything, is another filmmaker that gets amusingly parodied here. But I mean, it's just like I mean, to clarify, it's not like this is a Tarantino film. I'm saying that like only really Tarantino I feel like has gotten success in a similar way that I can really compare us to, because otherwise it feels it's like fully unique to what we are seeing from basically any other film that's coming out right now.
I think there are two things that are pretty true about this movie, but they seem contradictory. One of them is that this movie is just going to endlessly delight cinephiles to such a profound degree because of how much of a gift it is just to experience this film, just to sit in it and watch it. But it is one of those movies that is so hard to recommend. And I'm still struggling over who is going to watch this movie and have an experience that was as positive as mine. And I think of a lot of the people in my life who like movies. They watch plenty of movies, but this is such a specific wavelength, and I'm still parsing out what that means, because as much as I enjoyed watching it, I wonder, is that because my personality going into a film is I want new. I want to see something that represents not just the culture right now or a reaction to culture. I want to see something that shapes culture. I want to see something that's like 10 steps ahead of where culture is going. And that's not always fun for people, because people watch things and they want familiarity. They want culture reflected back to them. They want to recognize things. And I'm not going to take that away from people, because that's how some people go into movies. That's what they get out of movies that makes them happy. And I guess that's the litmus test, whatever. But I mean, do you agree with that? Like, I know we agree on this, right? Or like on that sense of like, that's what we want out of movies, but it is hard to sort of rationalize that against recommending this, I think.
Well, I think this is my reason for why I think this is an easier recommend than you might be giving it credit, is because unlike something like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which is a movie I like fine, but I think that's a movie where it's like trying to be like a cinephile's tragic romance, like the cinephile's Fault in Our Stars or whatever. And that's a movie where it's like name dropping like Herzog and Fassbinder and all these different filmmakers, but it feels like you kind of have to be familiar with them to really appreciate it. And it feels like there's sort of, I guess, maybe like a smugness or maybe some sort of like guardedness where like you can't fully maybe appreciate that film unless you have those references. Where this film, like outside of maybe one particular Brad Bird film and maybe The Matrix, I feel like you can watch this film not having seen the filmography of Wong Kar-wai, not having seen a Terrence Malick film, not having seen a Jodorowsky film, having not seen anything from Edgar Wright, and still, or anything from Michel Gondry or Charlie Kaufman or any of the other filmmakers I had mentioned, and still get something out of it, because at its core, it is a very personal and singular film about the immigrant experience, about untapping your full potential, about realizing the value of your life, about acknowledging that you can be greater than you even perceive yourself to be. And I think that's communicated such a unique and visceral way that even outside of its cinematic influences, I think you can just really appreciate how well crafted and how exuberant this movie is.
Well, that's not the concern I'm having. My concern isn't that people are going to watch it and be like, oh, I don't understand like the influences. Like, I don't think that's what will trip people up. I think what will trip people up potentially, and I hope I'm wrong about this, is that they're going to see it and it's going to be so chaotic, it's going to be so all over the place, that they are going to misread that as it's just too much and it can't keep up with it, or that it's trying to like shock them and not like really like hook on an emotional, story underneath. I mean, and I agree with you though that like the whole immigrant experience, like one of the main things of this movie is that Evelyn, can't accept that her daughter Joy is gay, and she's like trying to sort of parse that out between like the the choices and the regrets that she made in life and the things that she did. It's kind of funny because this film shares a lot of DNA with something like Turning Red in terms of like the mother-daughter experience and traditions and everything, but it's told more from the perspective from the mom than it is from the daughter. And I think that that all works. Like, I think people are going to get that, but I think at the presentation of it, I just see people just being like, when it's long, and I think that they're just going to be like, I'm done with this. Like, that's my worry and concern. The execution. I
get where you're coming from, and I don't think that's an invalid concern, because I think the film, even if you love it, it's a deliberately very overwhelming experience. And I can see if people aren't attuned to it or not on its wavelength or don't really appreciate what it's doing, you could easily check out and be like, this is overbearing, this is too cutesy, this is cloying or whatever. And if that's the case, I can understand that if it's just not your thing. I can't speak for anyone else but me or maybe you as far as whether that's the experience people will have, but I think yeah, I mean, it's a film that's deliberately not made for everyone, and I can't,
No, I mean, it doesn't have to be. I don't think that's the standard.
I think it's all the better for it. I mean, I think the fact that it is a very heartfelt and meaningful and specific film is what gives it its strength. I mean, that's, I think, so key to what makes this film unique. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, if people aren't going to be appreciative of that, I mean, that's kind of going back to the same thing I was saying about Swiss Army Man. I just hope they come around to it, because I think what the Daniels are doing is like, it feels like they're on another level right now. Like, it just feels like they're doing things with film that, it's not like they're like breaking new ground or anything, I don't think, but it just feels like they're doing things where it's like, I didn't even know you could really do this with, like, you were allowed to do this, like with stories and with humor in a way that it's like, I didn't know you could make a scene where two characters have hot dog fingers and are professing their love for each other can be weird and odd, but also poignant and powerful. It's just like, I didn't even know that's something you could do.
Yeah, there are filmmakers who are minimalist. The Daniels are maximalist.
They're maximalists. Yeah, yes. These are maximalist filmmakers to the max. Yeah,
and that's one of the things I love about them.
And that's like going back to what I was trying to say with RRR, is that's another maximalist film that is very, very bombastic and unabashedly afraid to be so, in a way that just feels like, okay, like this feels like it's cinema to its full potential in a way. Like, it feels like they didn't put anything off the table or didn't have any reservations about what they can do. And yeah, I can understand that being a bit much for some viewers or a casual viewer, but I don't know. I mean, I watch a movie like this and I feel like I didn't get everything, and there are certainly times where I find myself overwhelmed.
It's got to be rewatched, and we need to see it again.
But I think that's inspiring to me. Like, it feels like, okay, like I want to revisit this film because I want to get the most out of it with each viewing. And it feels like I haven't fully experienced it yet, just because you can't fully experience it with one viewing. And that's inspiring to me. Yeah. Yeah.
This is just one of those movies. I think that like people want movies sometimes, I think, to just be like an escape, which is cool. I think the movies that I want right now, based on like what we're going through as a world, I want movies that like pick me up and throw me away, that just like shake me around and just like are just this. Like, I think we need more movies like this that are just like yelling at us. And because I think we're all feeling this inside. We're all feeling chaotic. We're all feeling like we're not okay. And sometimes we're just kind of watching movies that are so safe and plain and vanilla because that's just what we think we want. Because everything's so chaotic in the movies, maybe things will be a little bit more simple. They'll be a little bit more understandable and formulaic. And I need movies like this. Like, I need movies like this that like feel like how I feel, that like operate like my brain. My brain is all over the place, and I feel like I have to be everywhere. I have to be doing all of these different things. I think a lot of people watching this maybe come from backgrounds, or people who watch this who are maybe LGBTQ, and they're seeing what's happening in here, and they're just connecting so much with just all of the pain and the chaos and just everything that's like hitting these characters in like every direction, every facet through all the brilliant filmmaking. I think like one thing you said too that I really want to harp on in terms of like, who's this is for, right? I don't even think this is for film nerds. I think this is for nerds. This is just one of those movies. Like, you don't have to be specifically like a cinephile, a film critic. Like, if you are just somebody who's just very nerdy, who, revels in obsessing over something you really love and care about, which is how I would categorize a nerd. You could be nerdy about all kinds of things. Then this is one of those movies that I think could really connect. And I think this is one of those movies, I imagine, there are people watching this who are like 13, 14 years old, and this is going to be like one of their awakening movies for them. And they're going to go on to be inspired by it for,
a game changer for them. Absolutely.
Right. That's one of the main reasons I wanted to start this out with, like, this is important. This is one of those important landmark milestone films. We're going to, people are going to mention in interviews for their new movie of like, what it was like when they saw everything everywhere all at once in the middle of a pandemic.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't want to say anything too hyperbolic from the jump, because I think that's a concern with a movie like this, where it is.
You think it'll get lost in time? You think we're just going to forget about it?
No. I don't think it's going to get lost in time. I'm just worried that the response is going to be so bombastic and overwhelming and visceral that I think other people are going to get turned off by it. And I think people are going to be pushed away or feel like, well, it can't be that. And then they see it and they have this more cynical perspective on it. And I feel like that's a concern that I genuinely have for the film. Because right now, I think last I checked, it is like the highest rated film on Letterboxd, which is fair because this is like Letterboxd the movie. But
I haven't seen it. Should I guess it? I'm going to play the game.
I mean, I haven't seen the score either. I saw on Twitter someone pointed out that like this is now like I think the highest rated Letterboxd film, and that might go down by tomorrow. I don't know.
I'm curious what the criteria is. Sure, yeah.
Maybe by the time people, I think it's just because people who are watching it are really responding to, and the type of people who like it a lot are going to be very effusive and probably give it 4.5, 5 stars, which is understandable. But I'm just worried that people are going to come in with some baggage that they wouldn't have had otherwise because they're going to see this and like expect too much from it.
That's
or they're
unavoidable,
like,
though.
I
don't think we could put too much stress on ourselves over that. It's like, what are you going to do? It's not like, you know.
Yeah. I just don't want its legacy to be tarnished in any way because people are too effusive from the jump. But it's kind of unavoidable with a film like this that feels like I was saying this to, I think the publicist or someone after me, it feels like it unlocks something in my brain where it's like, I didn't even know it could really do this with film right now, like in a way, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, maybe that's adding to the hyperbole, but it just feels like it's just like we can do this in a way that's like it's not like I said, it's not breaking new ground, but it just feels like we can approach things in a way that I don't think I've really seen filmmakers do, and that's what I find so uplifting and inspiring about the Daniels, that they're doing things that just it's like this why not approach that I feel is very impactful, and I think other directors have tried to do this and have fallen short, but it just feels like, yeah, why can't we make a movie where it has a farting corpse and people cry by the end? Why can't we make a movie where we do like everything that happens in this movie and yet it's still coherent and cohesive? And it's just like, that to me is so encouraging, uplifting for the state of future, or the future of cinema, I mean, in a way that I feel like people are kind of like, oh, now cinema is dead, like Marvel is taking over and all this shit. And it's like, okay, like if we can still get movies like this, I think we're going to be okay. But at the same time, I don't want to be a part of the crowd that's like hyping this up too much and prevent the film from being what it should be, I feel like, because like people are too quick to praise it from the jump. But it's like I said, it's kind of hard not to be that kind of person when you're talking about a film like this and it just came out. So I don't know.
I have seen people who have been like, oh, this for me is even better than Parasite. There are some people who are just like, oh my gosh, you know, and I feel like we were pretty responsible with how we talked about how this might not work for everybody. And so I want to applaud ourselves for, I don't think we're being too hyperbolic. I think we're being pretty measured, but I have noticed though, you do seem, ever since you saw this movie, Will, it does seem like you've changed. I don't remember you ever having like a googly eye on your forehead. I don't know what that means. But I guess it's this movie kind of affected you, and that's fine. That works.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I feel very inspired by the Daniels right now. I feel like they're doing things right now that make me feel like they're going to be doing a lot of amazing things moving forward. I hope they don't get
the live action Ratatouille.
Maybe if they feel inspired to do so. Like I said, like I feel like they have like cachet to basically do, or hopefully do anything they want to do, because they've proven like with just 2 films, or 3 if you count Death Dick Long, that like they can just take any far out concept and bring so much depth and potential and giddiness and silliness from it in a way that, I don't know, I just feel like they're very much on the path of doing some incredible work, and they already are doing incredible work. So I hope this trend continues from them, because they're just, yeah. And
especially like if they can keep on, like, I think, you know, I hope to see them like break through the culture noise, you know, like this movie's instantly quotable. And I hope that, like, you know, Just Be a Rock, you know, just like becomes like a thing, because it's just so poignant and pretty hilarious. But do you have any criticisms though? You know, like anything to criticize about this movie? Because like there are parts of this movie where I certainly was like, okay, you turned it up to 11 again. And I was kind of feeling like especially toward the end, I was like, I'm ready for this to wrap up. I don't know how you felt though. Like, I don't know if you felt like, okay, I want more. Yeah.
I would have kept watching, but I kind of agree that like, because it is so zany and so on and so and then with everything, that it is, like I said, a kind of overwhelming experience, at least only watching it this one time. Maybe with future viewings, it will be less overwhelming for me. But watching it now, it did feel like I felt kind of drained by the end of it in a way that I feel like is purposeful, and I feel like is what the filmmakers intended. And I think it's for the best, but I also kind of feel like I feel like I am a little exhausted from it in ways both good and bad.
All right. Well, any final words before we play the Rotten Tomatoes game? I think I'm ready to move on to the next movie here. I think this movie's good. 4 stars.
The only thing I was just gonna say, I don't know how you saw the film, but I was fortunate enough to see it at my IMAX.
I saw it standard screening.
Okay, yeah. I mean, they had a one night only IMAX showing of the film, which is great. And I got to see the A24 logo on the IMAX screen, which is something I never expected to see. And I thought that was certainly the best way to see the film for obvious reasons. So
I have to disagree because I wanted to see this at the Castro Theater in San Francisco. I was supposed to go to that, but I missed it. And the Daniels were there. And I think some of the cast were there too. And the historic theater, I would have absolutely loved to see it there. Especially because I've seen Daniel Scheinert before for he was there for Death of Dick Long at one point too. And I would have been carrying on that tradition of seeing the Daniels in San Francisco, at least one of them.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, I think no matter how you can see the film, I hope people go out and see it and support it. And yeah, I just want the Daniels to do more great things like this and keep getting budgets that allow them to do the zaniest, goofiest things they can while not overburdening themselves at the same time. But yeah, I mean, whatever they're going to do, they are guaranteed to get viewing from me, I think, at this point moving forward, because they're just really awesome guys making some really, really cool movies. And even though this movie at times was like, I was like, is this movie too much for me? Like, I almost like, there was 1 or 2 points where I almost like wanted to turn the film because I was like, this seems like it's almost too much my thing. But I feel like they never pushed it too far, and that's a credit to them. And I also just think the world building of this film cannot be overstated as far as how credible it is, just in terms of like capturing such personal dynamics while acknowledging the rules of the world while also expanding that world and proving how endless and expansive it can be without making that experience overwhelming or confusing to the point of like being hard to follow, I think. And I think that's something that just amazes me so much about the film, especially upon reflection. So those are just a couple things I just wanted to say before we moved on to the Rotten Tomatoes game.
I think I even texted you after the movie and I was like, oh yeah, this is a Will movie. This is a Will Ashton feature if I ever saw one.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. 143 reviews have been counted the day we record this. And I mean, it's been out for a little while now. It hit limited release last week. So we're kind of catching it on its upswing. I think it's expanding into more theaters as we speak. But yeah, out of the 143 reviews, what do you think the Rotten Tomato score is for this one, Will?
94%?
97%, a little bit higher. Yeah, critics are in love with this. And I think 97 out of 143, that's one of the best ratios I think we've seen in a minute. Unless I'm totally missing something.
Yeah, I know one of the Daniels like on Twitter was just like, I think it's possible you guys are praising this film too much. I made it. It's like almost in a way, it's just like, I think he's almost kind of afraid that like people are going to like,
I say be fearless. He's fearless enough to make the movie. Be fearless about the...
But he's also seemed to be pretty like self-deprecating and affable at the same time, which I think are both great traits to have.
Understandable. Okay. Audience score. We have 250 plus ratings for that. What do you think the audience score is?
88%.
It is not 88%. Will Ashton. It is 95%.
Nice.
That's pretty good. I mean, it's not a lot, 250 to count, but yeah. Audiences, I mean, to your earlier point, seem to be pretty okay with this one. All right, there's no cinema score. I looked it up. I think because it's still technically in limited release, so I don't think they did the ratings for it. But we can look at Letterboxd since we did reference it earlier. I don't know what your prediction is for Letterboxd, Will. What do you think? Out of 5? Let me actually see. We have 19,000 people have logged it on Letterboxd, which is quite a lot for a movie in limited release. But yeah, what do you think the rating is?
4.8.
It is 4.6. A little bit lower than that, but that is really good. Like 4.6, that's the highest I think we have ever tracked while playing the game.
It is the highest on Letterboxd, supposedly.
It is currently number 1 in the Letterboxd top 250 narrative feature films. So the top 250 on Letterboxd is based on the average weighted rating of all Letterboxd users. So that's what was being referenced before. I think that's what somebody noticed. This is a list by Dave Weiss, and it looks like, it dethroned Parasite. Parasite was the highest rated before this, 4.6, but I guess it's more than that. I don't know.
I think Come and See is like number 3.
It is. It is number 3. And then Harry Carey, I can never say it, the 1962 film is number 4. The Godfather is number 5. Which is actually
Godfather Part 2 is 6, right?
Yes, I was gonna say part 6. It is 6. A Dog's Will, the movie based on your life, is number 7. And Human Condition, 7 Samurai, and 12 Angry Men. Great, what a list.
Yeah. Imagine doing like a marathon of all those movies with your bros.
Yeah, like a podcast where you just go through the Letterboxd.
Yeah.
Top 250.
Are you worried that Letterboxd is going to be like the next IMDb?
Worried?
Like eventually it's going to be like Shawshank Redemption is the number 1 movie of all time.
Well, Shawshank is number 13 right now.
Oh, really? What went to number 1 IMDb?
Oh, I'm talking about on Letterboxd 250.
No, I'm talking IMDb, baby.
I know, but I'm just saying it's on the Letterboxd number 13. It's not like it's that different.
But I feel like IMDb right now is like number 1 movie, Shawshank Redemption, number 2, Godfather, number 3, The Departed, number 4, let's say Borat, and number 5, we're going to have to go with Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Letterboxd, I just feel like, is such a different kind of site. And
so that's IMDb, but
it's beloved by cinephiles. You know, I think IMDb is one of those things, like, you go to it, you don't really spend time on there. You don't socially connect with people on there. This is more of a social media app. That's why we love it, I think. I mean, in terms of, logging things.
Yeah, I mean, I love it for like the diary aspect of it, and that I can see basically other people's viewing diaries.
100%.
And I mean, that's what I find endearing and what
it's the Spotify of watching movies,
if you say so. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, this isn't an ad nor a condemnment of Letterboxd, just a casual inquiry, if anything.
Yeah, we're not being paid to say this. We just love Letterboxd that much. All right.
Sure.
Let's talk about one more movie before we call it a night. Let's talk about Apollo 10.5, A Space Age Childhood. This is the latest film directed by Richard Linklater. Now, we haven't talked about a Richard Linklater film on this show, you and me, since... I mean, we didn't talk about Where'd You Go, Bernadette, right?
I was going to say, I saw it.
I don't think we did an episode on it.
You didn't see it, right?
I saw it, but I think I saw it way later. Like, I think I saw it like...
That was a film...
during the holiday season.
Because that film, it takes place in San Francisco, if I'm not mistaken. But it was filmed in Pittsburgh. So I like to think that the world that movie exists is the hometown of Cinemaholics. There is a shot in that film.
We did.
We did?
So September 8th, 2019, episode 133 of the Cinemaholics podcast, which we did. That was our featured review of It Chapter 2. And we talked about Where'd You Go, Bernadette about 8 minutes in. And then you talked about Loose and the Nightingale because you had just seen that, but it had been a while. Man, this is back when we did so many movies. We also reviewed American Factory, the new Dave Chappelle special, and then Brittany Runs a Marathon, and we finished the show with It Chapter 2. What a wild episode. And if you're wondering, like, hey, I want to know more information about all the episodes of Cinemaholics, go to cinemaholics.com.
The episode with It Chapter 2? I thought we started it with It Chapter 2.
Say again? You're being kind of quiet.
Oh, I said we finished the episode with It Chapter 2?
Yeah, we did at the very end. The format was all over the place.
No,
yeah,
man.
We even did a listener email at the very beginning of the show.
Wow.
And
we should bring those back.
Well, we don't get as many emails these days. I always forget about them too. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no. We did talk about Where'd You Go, Bernadette. So this is I think the third time we're talking about. No. Yeah, it is because we did Last Flag Flying. I was about to say Everybody Wants Some was before you and I started doing Cinemaholics.
Was it?
Was it 2016?
Yes. So
Okay.
I did talk about Everybody Wants Some on Now Conspiring, previous podcast, because I think that's a really fun movie. I really liked Everybody Wants Some. I liked Last Flag Flying.
I was a big fan of that one.
I thought Where'd You Go, Bernadette was cute.
Wasn't a fan of that one, though.
Huh?
Was not a fan of Where'd You Go, Bernadette. Loved Last Flag Flying. Loved Everybody Wants Some.
Before that, we had really Linklater's last big movie that actually, like, I think was a big deal was Boyhood. Was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, Best Picture, Best Director, and I think Best Original Screenplay, right? Was the third one?
Sure. Did you know that movie was filmed over 12 years?
It was. 12 years.
Little known fact about it.
I want to say Patricia Arquette won something for it. Wasn't it
she won
Academy
Supporting
Award?
Actress at the Oscars. I believe Ethan Hawke was nominated for his performance as well.
There you go. Boyhood, good movie. I think people like to hate on Boyhood. I get it.
I think it's a classic sort of... I think it's a better film than Coda, but I think it's a classic example of a Coda type film where that's such a small, personal, intimate film that really works on its own merits. It has flaws. I don't think its execution is perfect, given the way it was filmed over the course of 12 years. There's not going to, there are going to be highs and lows, I guess. But I think when it works, it really sings. But I think it got thrusted into like this like award season mess where people put too much on it, expected too much from it. And it became sort of like an enemy of the award season because people are acting like it's sort of like this like highbrow, like hoity-toity indie film that is inaccessible to movie or people when it's really just a very sweet, pretty incredible work of filmmaking. But it's not my personal favorite Linklater film.
It's a Linklater film, and I'm going to say, I think that basically captures it. I think that basically
a School of Rock, yeah.
That basically captures it. I didn't care, man. When this stuff was going on and people were just like complaining of Boyhood, I just liked the movie. Like I remember, sure, there was some review. Who cares? Like, yeah, there was like backlash. Same deal with like stuff like La La Land. It happens. In terms of Boyhood, yeah, I just thought it was a nice movie. I watched it on an airplane. Like, I don't know. What's the big deal? Calm down. I love Richard Linklater. He's one of my all-time favorite directors. I know we've talked about it. I love most of his movies. I mean, yeah, the guy's made a few movies that are total stinkers. But
you can't just make that claim. And then what's your stinker category?
My stinker category, and I'm no way stand by this, Bad News Bears.
Yeah, well, that's the worst one.
Where'd You Go, Bernadette? Which you already mentioned.
Yeah, that was in the stinker category, unfortunately.
And
I got cut out of the movie, so maybe that's why I was in the stinker category.
I do think,
I don't want to assume.
I'm not a fan of A Scanner Darkly.
That'd be fighting words.
I know. I understand. I really love Waking Life, which of course, Waking Life, Scanner Darkly, and now Napolitan and a Half are his 3 like animated movies, right? I'm not forgetting one, right?
No, those are the 3 animated ones. Yeah. And surprisingly, I haven't seen Waking Life. That's one of the few Linklater films I haven't seen.
You haven't seen what?
Waking Life.
Okay, sorry, it's kind of hard to hear. You gotten kind of quiet.
Okay, that's not good.
I highly recommend Waking Life. I think it's
I've heard it's great.
Brilliant film. Brilliant. But I haven't seen all of his movies. There are a few I haven't seen at all. I haven't seen Suburbia. I haven't seen his very first movie, which I mean, I think it's only on like the Slacker Criterion. It's called It's Impossible to Learn to Plow
by
reading books
or something. Yeah. I haven't seen that one either. I haven't seen Suburbia. I haven't seen Tape. I haven't seen
I haven't seen Tape either.
Those are, I think, the big ones I haven't seen. But
I haven't seen Me and Orson Welles. That's the other one.
Oh, that one's pretty. Yeah, it's all right. It's cute.
But I've seen basically everything else. School of Rock. I just rewatched that this past year. One of my comfort movies. The Before trilogy, I think, is one of the greatest trilogies of all time. Arguably the best of all time.
Yeah, I think it's probably his best work.
And Dazed and Confused. I mean, that's a generational anthem. Love revisiting that one.
Iconic film. Probably. Iconic. Yeah, I would say Dazed and Confused probably is most iconic. School of Rock is most famous. The Before trilogy is best work.
Slacker, I want to revisit. I've only seen it the once, and I just remember liking it. But I wonder if I would like it a lot more all these years later.
I like it a lot. Yeah, I like that movie.
And now we have Apollo 10 and a half. Now there is going to be a new Linklater film coming out someday called Merrily We Roll Along. We've mentioned
that
on the show.
like 20 years in the future or whatever. Yeah, that one's, you're going to have to get your Fandango tickets for that later.
Which I don't even know, because like Linklater's in his 60s at this point. I'm just kind of curious how that's going to come about. But anyway, one thing, if you've watched a lot of Linklater films, you know the guy's from Texas. He grew up in Houston. A lot of his movies take place in Texas, center around Texas. Everybody Wants Some, Dazed and Confused, Boyhood, I guess. Boyhood was in Texas, right? I think I have that right.
Yeah. It's a safe bet to assume that his movie, whatever movie you're thinking of, it's a safe bet to assume it takes place in Texas.
Yeah. I mean, Last Like Flying and Where Do You Go, Bernadette certainly weren't. So it's been a while since we came around. I think Bernadette was like Seattle or something. Last Like Flying was like a road trip along the East Coast.
I just did a whole bit about this. Yeah, it takes place in Seattle, but or is it Seattle or is it San Francisco? I thought it was San Francisco.
That was
Is
Seattle.
it Seattle?
Pretty sure.
Okay. Well, okay, then in that case, that movie is like the marrying of Maverick Hines' world and my world, because there's a scene where you see Bernadette looking over a pier, which is the city line for Pittsburgh, but they added some Seattle landmarks, and it's like this kind of unholy combination of Pittsburgh and Seattle.
Unholy.
And it's like, that's, in my view, that's where Cinemaholics takes place. That's where we record. That's where our office is. It's in that little Seattle,
just that
Pittsburgh
area.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. It also caused the rift of Cinemaholics, the reason Maverick Hines had to step away from the show. Okay. But Apollo 10 and a half is an animated movie, and it takes place in the 1960s, late 1960s, sort of. It's kind of all over the place in terms of its timeline, but it's an animated movie that is essentially capturing the childhood of a kid growing up in Houston, Texas at the height of the space race. So Houston, of course, was like the central command of NASA, where they were doing all the Apollo missions. And you had a lot of people who worked for NASA living and raising their families in the Houston area. And we kind of follow like a hapdash mosaic life of this one kid. The movie opens with this kid and as an adult being narrated by Jack Black, and he it kind of has like a little bit of like the Sandlot feel to it in that respect. And you're meeting this kid who's like grown up in this time, clearly a bit of like, not a direct, I think, replication of Richard Linklater's life. Like, for example, Linklater didn't have 5 siblings, so it's not like a biographical film in any sense. And of course, like the movie starts with like, I think Linklater has said that like a real fantasy he had as a kid, which is that, you know, he grew up wishing he had been an astronaut and what it would have been like if he had gone to the moon. Apollo 10 and a half is a reference, of course, to the Apollo 11 mission, but the movie begins with Zachary Levi and Glenn Powell basically approaching this kid and being like, we accidentally made the lunar module too small. We need a kid instead of a smaller person to pilot this to the moon, and they choose him because he's good at kickball. And you're watching it and you're like, okay, I get what this movie is. This is this kid. Like at one point the kid is even just like, I was a total liar. And you're like, yeah, of course you were. But what's funny about the movie is it opens with that, right? It's like, oh, this is a movie about a kid who becomes an astronaut. But of course, it's not being literal. It's just being fun. He's 10 and a half years old. And it's right before Apollo 11. We get it. That's cute. But then... Say what?
First Boy. I was going to say it's First Boy, not First Man.
First
Boy.
Prequel
to First Man, yeah.
Exactly. But then for the next hour of the film, it has nothing whatsoever to do with that plot point. And this movie breaks one of the most important rules of storytelling. And I almost applaud it. Like, your story always starts with a promise, right? Your screenplay always begins with, you make a promise to the audience. The first chapter, the prologue, whatever it is, tells you what you're in for. So you can't just like break that promise and just be like, oh, actually, no, that's not what this movie is. We're going to spend an hour where Jack Black is narrating this kid's random life, like all these things. And for some weird reason, this movie totally gets away with it, because I found myself not caring at all about him being an astronaut. At one point I was just like when it gets back to that, I was like, oh, we don't have to do that, Rich. Like we could just we're good. Like we don't have to we don't have to like follow through on that whole thing. Just keep showing me this kid's life. It's entertaining just to like walk through what it was like to grow up during the space age in this time, and when you were like a white privileged kid and just did not understanding the world and kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And I thought like all of that stuff, like going back and forth in time and just going through all these childhood memories and the randomness of narration, the randomness of your memories and how they're stitched together. It's this wandering, meandering piece of film, easy to criticize. I found myself really warmed up to it and finding a lot of comfort in it, even though I'm not from Texas or have any connection to what that life was like. But like, I think that version of Americana is basically mythical. But I can't deny that I found a lot of it kind of comforting. And also, you know, it was honest about certain things. It wasn't like a total like whitewash of history or anything, but it also doesn't go very far. That's my quick review of the movie. I think as a Netflix film, easy to watch right now. It's very accessible. And I think it's a total blast of the past. What do you think, Will?
I like it. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it quite reaches the same heights as some of the Linklater films that I love, but
Agreed.
Certainly as a streaming only watch, it is a very agreeable, very sweet, and in its own little weird way, a kind of touching film as well. But I think what fascinates me more so than the story structure of the film is how it uses animation. As you mentioned with Waking Life and with Scanner Darkly. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen Waking Life, but from what I can tell, that's a film that is very like philosophical, and it's using sort of like the logic of dreams and like one's like perception of the blend between reality and their dreams to like this animation style is kind of making a fluidity with things that are kind of hard to conceptualize and visualize. And likewise with Scanner Darkly, it's a sort of dystopian future story, but it's also a tale about drug addiction and identity. And it's kind of using that animation style to capture the paranoia and the isolation and the loss of control in a really unique and I think ultimately pretty compelling way. It seems you disagree, but that's fine. But with this film, it's not really using that for any sort of like philosophical or like horror or terror or like grander thing so much as something that's very insular and making it about the idea of nostalgia and one's personal reflection and, like you said, one's sense of like kind of making things both grander and smaller than they actually were at the time by using animation to capture this sort of nostalgic look at this time where it's like not exactly true to life, but it's not exactly false at the same time. Like the things that they're pointing out historically are broadly true, but his reflection of the time period, it's, you know, he's a storyteller, he's a narrator here. And so we're engaged and we're liking it, but the animation gives us the freedom to be like, this isn't beholden to truth. Like this isn't like actually like exactly how this played out. This is how he envisions it, whether he wants to embellish it or whether it's like slightly off or whether it's you know, a little bit smaller, grander than it actually was. The animation kind of frees him to make it whatever he wants it to be, and also allows for some of the more sci-fi and fantastical things to not feel completely out of place as they might have been in a traditional live action version of the story. And I think that's really what kind of surprised me and won me over about the film more than anything that you're referring to more specifically about the approach to the narrative. But as far as that is concerned, I think that's just the magic of Richard Linklater, is that he can kind of do these things that are like, well, yeah, it's not like what what's his name, Robert McGee or whatever, the like classic storytelling approach. It's not like a hero's journey thing. McKee, sorry. It's not. He might have a field day with his complaints about how this film approaches story, but like
I think John Truby is like, probably either John Truby or Michael Haig would probably be the screenwriters that would be most offended by.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
even they say that all these rules are meant to be broken. Sorry, I
sure.
It's okay.
But what I mean to say is that I think Linklater is so agreeable as a filmmaker more often than not, and so warm and inviting that like even when he doesn't follow the rules or goes against convention, it's kind of hard to dislike what he's doing because it's so affable and so winsome, but also like it doesn't feel like it's like meandering or like wasting your time. Like there's a greater point to it, but you're willing to indulge it anyhow because Linklater just makes very winsome films in his own specific agreeable sort of way.
And that's part of Linklater's style, is to break the rules. It's not like we don't expect this from him. You know, like Last Flag Flying and Where'd You Go, Bernadette were pretty formulaic by comparison, but like everybody wants them. The structure of that movie is basically like there's basically no like plot arc to it. There's not really much of like characters learning anything. There's no all is lost moment. Like the structure of it is just like, these guys are just starting out college. Let's see what happens. The structure of Boyhood is just like filling it over 12 years, and that they didn't really have like a really good plan. They just kind of winged it. Like he constantly is getting away with stuff like this in his movies. The before movies, I mean, you know, having the actors write the dialogue and not really approaching it. Like he's just that kind of filmmaker where he tends to prioritize the humanity of his scripts over the logic and the rules, and it tends to work out really well for him because I just think he's just a very affable, endearing human being who just has his finger on the pulse of what it's like to be a person in the modern age. He's just very good at telling those kinds of stories. To the animation, I think that what's I'm a little conflicted because on the one hand, I think like how else could you tell the story? I think that the animation speaks so well to the nostalgia. It like fits the characters so well, and like going back and forth and how everything feels like this summer haze is like attached to it the way that a memory tends to be. And like it's even sort of like spoken of in a meta commentary kind of way through the narration. But also like this is a technique that is kind of similar to rotoscoping, where some of the film, a lot of it I imagine was shot in live action, but they kind of like animate over it is the technique, right? And that's something that, you know, rotoscoping has been around for as long as animation has been around. And it's something that like it almost makes it feel at times like watercolors almost, but with like really good edges, so that it's not like what you're seeing looks like it's impossible or that it couldn't happen, but it does sort of have this fantastical edge, which does fit the whole angle of like the kid imagining himself as an astronaut and bemoaning the fact that his dad is like a pencil pusher and not somebody more important as he perceives it at NASA, but him coming to terms with the importance of the moment and how everybody came and like worked together without putting too fine of a point on it. I have to say though, my personal theory about this movie is that I don't think Linklater knew what he had until he finished the movie. And I imagine he went into this being like, well, you know, he probably first envisioned it as live action, but then was like, well, I think like to really pull this off, especially like Kid in Space, like we're going to have to animate it because how else do you do that? They just didn't have the budget, I imagine. But then after they finished the movie, and this was a pandemic movie, they made it during COVID. I got to imagine Linklater looked at this, or maybe people looked at this and were like, if we had made this in live action, like if we had put this out and put like real work into it as a live action feature, this is like a movie that could have been like nominated for like Best Picture or something. It kind of has that feel to it. Like I'm not knocking it down or hyping it or anything. I'm just saying that like it does seem like a big event movie that you could market for award season in a similar way to Boyhood. My little pet theory. I could be totally way off though.
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, to what you're saying, I mean, I don't know exactly how they approach the film, but I mean, obviously it is trying to mirror the rotoscope style that they use for Waking Life and with Scared Darkly, though it does seem like they use obviously more like CG or like digital technology. I'm assuming that you're right, though, that they used like they actually filmed the stuff and then they just kind of animated over it. And I did wonder if that was a choice because of COVID, or if it was just something that Linklater always wanted to do, because obviously he has a precedent for it, and like you know, it's something that he really loves. And I think, like I said, like I feel like the nostalgia stuff was probably always inherent to how he wanted to envision this film and how he wanted it to be perceived. But yeah, I mean, I guess for me, the one thing that holds it back narratively that I feel like might have been a crutch for it not being well received, whether it was animation or live action, is that it is very talky, not like in the way his movies are normally talky, where it's like people are having conversations, but it's a lot of Jack Black explaining things for long periods of time. And I feel like that's I get why it's done in that way, but that is a lot of the movie.
It's a lot of narration.
Jack Black, yeah.
And it's weird because I'm glad though at the same time it's not half and half, where it's just like stretches where he doesn't talk and the stretches where he does. At least I committed to it because I don't know. At least they didn't try to force in like a narrative arc to try to like weave all this stuff together. It's just somebody telling a story, and it's fully that.
Which is fine, yeah, but it just feels like what I felt was most impactful about the film was, I guess, ultimately the ending of it. And I think the ending isn't impactful unless we have all that stuff with him explaining, like, getting us to know the characters, getting us to know the family, getting us to appreciate the sort of metaphor of it being like a parallel between him approaching adulthood, kind of, you know, in his own way. Like, even though being a man is something that everyone, you know, or like coming into adulthood is something that everyone experiences, it can feel kind of isolating and feel like you're going into terrain territory, and like this idea of like the space launch happening in his backyard kind of adds this very intriguing personal metaphor. And I feel like the end where it's able to communicate that without over explaining it and without characters kind of explaining everything that's happening is what I found more endearing. And I wish the movie had trusted itself, I guess, to have more moments where it wasn't just explaining the time and the period and the characters and like, this is how things were different, this is how things cost this instead of this and all this.
Yeah, I do think it needed moments. Like, it needed scenes where the narration shut up for a second and just let Stan talk to his mom about something, or like ask her a question and have it needed those moments of poignancy that like, let's take a break from this just for a minute, just to like kind of sit in this. So yeah, it doesn't really have that.
And I think that's, to me, is what prevents us from being more than just like a good to pretty good film. Like, I think it would have been very good to great if it had trusted itself more to just. And I mean, I love Jack Black. Like, it's nothing against his narration. I think he does a fine job. But I think it's just it's over reliance on narration, I think, becomes one of its main problems. I think
what saves it is I think Jack Black is really good at narrating. Maybe it's just something I really like about the cadence of his voice, but just the way that he's talking about it, it's not ho-hum. It's not ho-hum about it. It's not doldrum. It feels like he's really putting his heart into it. Like, you're really feeling like it's the real person. And I think that speaks to Jack Black as a really good voice actor. The Kung Fu Panda movies have proven that time and again. I think that like he's just able to say things in an interesting way, you know, like with a little bit of a country accent, and just kind of being like, we didn't know that this was a thing, but you know, I guess that probably wasn't safe. We were just a car accident away from a catastrophe, you know, like you hear it and you believe it with this guy. And so I think it does kind of save the movie. All that said, I want to mention this too, because it's definitely a Netflix movie that is definitely like, there are two approaches to this, right? You're either going to watch it as somebody who grew up in this time and be like, oh, I remember that, and kind of wash in the nostalgia, or you're going to be somebody who's just like, oh, that's kind of interesting, I didn't know that, you know? And I think what works about the movie is it rides that line pretty well. It has the member berries, it has a little bit of like, remember the 60s, but at the same time, you could enjoy this as somebody who doesn't remember the 60s, who was just kind of like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Oh, cool. You know, like that's what life was like, you know, in Houston, like when NASA was like right down the road. That's a cool little detail. Yeah. But it's interspersed with all these other like childhood things from the 60s that are very unique to the 60s that other people can pick up on.
And those specifically, or the things that are so specific to this time period, and things that clearly come from Linklater's past, not, like you said, fully being autobiographical, but things that clearly like he thinks about, or things that like he's imparting from his life into this narrative, I think makes it feel more alive and more vibrant. I just think that the fact that the movie relies on that for such a large chunk of the film, away from developing more of the characters, developing more of the family life, developing more of this main character, I think that's what prevents it from being a more enriching experience. Ultimately, I think the like world building, such as it is fine and good, but I also feel like there could have been, you could have used that time to make something a little bit more subdued, I guess, a little bit more willing to be quiet and patient. And I think that's generally where I feel Linklater is at his best. And I feel like this movie had a lot of moments like that, but it could have had some more if he allowed himself to do so.
Yeah, there was a moment in this when I was thinking of Ready Player One, because you just have this whole diatribe where he's just like listing off all this pop culture, just like in a list, just to sort of be like, and this and this and this and this and this. And it's like a mix of like things you have heard. He does that. And then he's like, okay, but then here were the deep cuts. Here were the TV shows, here were the things like we would watch, and it was about this. And like, I looked up some of it and I was like, oh, that's a real thing. Like, I had no idea there was a show that was about that. There's a lot of stuff like that. Not knocking the film or anything, but yeah, it does kind of indulge for sure. And some of Linklater's bona fides, like, the stuff he nerded out about when he was a kid. I just think this is just a cute little Saturday morning cartoon animated trip to the 1969 Houston days. I don't know, like that. Not much else to say. I mean, it's just.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
I mean, I think. And this is going to maybe sound like an insult, but it's actually a very sincere and high compliment.
I'm ready.
I feel like this is a movie that is made only for Richard Linklater. And I think that's probably the best thing about it. Because it's not really like for kids, per se.
No, I mean, kids can watch it. It's not mature or anything.
Oh, for sure.
There's like one little like image of like somebody's arm getting messed up. That's about it.
Well, there's that. Yeah. I mean, there's also like, scenes that show or reference pornography.
Barely.
And like little things like that. It's a PG-13 film, basically. Like there's stuff in here that is not really meant for kids, but it's in an animation style. So I feel like teenagers and maybe young adults are going to be like, oh, I don't know if it's really for me, because they just assume it's for kids, and it's a little bit too intense and too like I said, like nostalgic for young children. So it's like, I feel like it's made primarily for Richard Linklater, and I think that's very inspiring and endearing. That's stuff I want Netflix to do. I want
there you go.
Netflix to fund filmmakers just making movies for them that like other film studios would not be willing to do. My only disappointment as far as Netflix is concerned is not only the fact they just dumped it on their service with little fanfare, but didn't give it more of a theatrical release. Right. I feel like some of the scenes, especially in space, would like. I
forget if we said Linklater, it premiered at South by.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like. Linklater, not a man that's particularly known for his visuals per se, but there are some scenes, especially in space, that I think are some of the best visuals that he's ever produced as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and even like the archive footage. I mean, how many times have we seen archive footage of the Apollo mission and the John F. Kennedy speech in 1961, 1960? Mm-hmm. But like the way they do it with this animation, it adds like an interesting little bit of a unique touch to it, a unique flair that I was kind of gripped by. So yeah lots to like in this film movie.
And I feel like, I mean, I cracked a joke about it earlier, but I really do think like Linklater probably saw First Man and like this clicked for him. Like I imagine it's an idea he's had like hatched in his brain for a while.
Yeah, I bet.
But there's like a lot of stuff that feels like it's taken from First Man. Not that's like stolen or anything, but like stuff that's like, I feel like he had like the broad idea for this movie for a long time, and then he saw First Man and was like, oh,
it's time.
I got it.
It was a smart move to do it. Over the pandemic, to like during this time when, we were in isolation and everything, to kind of just like take a step back and remember the past and kind of like relish in your childhood. And it's a good project to do. I think I could see why he leaned toward it. But yeah, that's Apollo 10.5, a space age childhood. It's now available to watch on Netflix. It was produced by Netflix Animation, and it's just 98 minutes long. Let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. And Will Ashton, we have 94 reviews counted for Apollo 10.5. I imagine most of these are from South by Southwest, but of course we'll see more trickling in as this thing has been out for a couple of days as we record this. What do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score is at this point?
79%.
Wow, that's a bit lower than it actually. It's 91%.
Oh, really? Okay. Cool.
Yeah, critics are liking it.
Like,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was afraid that some critics are like, "Oh, it's too slight." Like, another thing.
I think that is that's a smart prediction to make. I would not be surprised if this goes down a bit. We do not have an audience score. 0 audience score ratings. But I mean, like you said, it was just kind of dumped on Netflix.
Was even in their top 10 last I checked for the weekend. So I mean,
I'll have to check that myself. I haven't seen the top 10 lately, but I think The Rental, a movie we reviewed in 2020, was in the top 10. And I was like, oh yeah, that movie.
Right. I mean, I found it pretty interesting that like when I was checking the top 10 for The Bubble, like a film that I'm sure they wanted to be number 1 was number 3 behind like The Blind Side or something, like a 12-year-old movie at this point. I'm looking up the top 10 right now, and yeah, you're right. So Bridgerton is number 1. This is the top 10 in the US. Bridgerton, and then The Blind Side, like you said. Yeah. Shrek Forever After, the final chapter.
soon to be a season on It Ain't Ogre Till It's Ogre.
Not gonna happen, but
False
I think we
advertising.
might discuss it at some point.
The Bubble is number 4. Is It Cake? Heartland, Get Organized with the Home Edit. I don't even know what that is. Inventing Anna, which has been killing it. I mean, it's still in the top 10. That's wild.
Okay.
Coco Melon, Kids Show, and then Good Girls. So,
Sure.
yeah, not even in the top 10.
Well, Coco Melon, does that like just permanently have a spot in the top 10 of Netflix?
I cannot tell you, actually.
That's like the
I thought
kid
The
thing,
Rental
right?
was in the top 10. I guess it's not. I thought I saw it on the top 10. Maybe it was on the trending. But yeah.
Isn't Inventing Anna supposed to be really bad?
I've heard. I've seen a lot of people like make fun of it and meme it. There were like some of the quotes from the show, but that's TikTok for you. But I guess we can do Letterboxd. We do have a Letterboxd rating.
Okay.
We have 7,000 watches on Letterboxd. What do you think the average rating is out of 5?
3.4.
4.9. Just kidding.
Wow, I was gonna say
3.6.
that's higher than.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah. It's 3.10 and a half. Yeah. But yeah, you were close.
What's the actual
3.6.
score?
That is very much. This is such a 3.5 star movie. Yeah. Definition of it. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's like between 3 and 3.5. It's like very fine, very lovely. I like what it's doing formally. I just kind of wish it didn't talk so much. But
That's how I feel
kind
about
of like that
you,
talk
Will
so much.
Ashton.
Yeah. There you go. But I mean, not a complaint I commonly have about Linklater films. I love how much they talk and how talky they are. But
He's good at
this
that.
one, I kind of wanted him to. I wanted Linklater to do a little more showing, a little less telling this time. But that's maybe just me.
Well, here's me telling you what's coming up on the show next week. We have Sonic the Hedgehog 2 from Paramount, which is going to be hitting
Which
wide
you
release this weekend.
Have seen.
I saw it on Saturday, and my review for it is on cinemaholics.com. If you want to check out my, it's a video review, and you can read the review as well.
Liked it?
It's okay.
Maybe. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, the first one was okay.
It's just like the first one, but it's a little bit better than the first one because it's more like the games in the sense that like they actually go to kind of some cooler places. Like they kind of go to like places around the world, and it's a little bit more of an adventure, but it's also just, it's like a mashup of every blockbuster movie. It's like very indicative of like the movies of the 20 teens. Like it has something, a little bit of something from like all of those movies from the last decade. So I do
there's
not
your
see you
review.
liking it much.
Okay.
also
Well,
kinda
I mean, I
long.
thought the first one's okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, the reason I didn't see it Saturday as well is because it was 2 hours and change.
Yeah.
And
You saw Triple R.
the time they had the screening would have conflicted with when my work schedule was about to start. So
Not a problem.
I opted to see an earlier showing of RRR, a 3-hour film, instead, which actually got me to work right on time. So what can you say?
We will also probably, I assume we're going to be talking about Ambulance, new Universal film directed by Michael Bay. It's been a while since he put out a movie that wasn't on Netflix, huh?
I'm more interested in Ambulance at this point than Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I'm sure you're in the exact opposite camp.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen it. I've seen Ambulance in a day or two, and Jake Gyllenhaal, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, Isaac Gonzalez, and that's a cast.
I mean, you were very much against Six Underground, his previous film.
Yes, one of the worst films put to film in the last few years.
I know you said something hyperbolic like that, and I feel like it was fine.
Yeah,
but
you're allowed to say things.
I admire your passion against the film. And I don't know, this one looks kind of fun though.
I want to see it. I haven't seen the trailer, but it's called Ambulance. I like ambulances. There's also
you see, John, the words or the abbreviation LA is in the word ambulance, and so in the trailer you see
I can't keep
ambulance.
up with all this marketing. It's a little bit too much.
The title ambulance, but then the letters LA stand out, and you're like, oh.
If you want to stick to streaming this coming weekend, though, All the Old Knives is going to be hitting Amazon Prime Video. It'll also be in limited theaters too. It looks like
All the Old Knives.
Yeah.
In this economy.
Well, I mean, look at this cast. We have some old knives in this cast, sharp as ever. We have Chris Pine, Tandy Newton, Lawrence Fishburne, Jonathan Pryce. It's definitely a good cast here. But yeah, it looks like a pretty like dry film, I guess.
Sure.
from the poster. I haven't seen the trailer.
Okay. Who knows? I don't know what this is. An Amazon film.
Amazon, it is. Yeah, the Amazon Studios made it. And then last, we have a Netflix film. If you want to check out Netflix this weekend, we have Metal Lords, a teen comedy written by D.B. Weiss and directed by Peter Sullivan.
Isn't that like Deathgasm Jr. or whatever?
That's the word on the street. I think the biggest name in it
That's what the kids are saying.
Yeah, that's what they're talking about. The kid from Knives Out is in it, Jaden Martell, and then also Joe Manganiello is in it as well. And then I think it's one of those like who's who of like probably I assume kids who shown up on like Disney Channel shows, and I think Brett Gelman is in it too. Actually, people recognize him. But yeah, those are your options.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely gonna see one or two of those and discuss them on this here podcast with you. So,
or we could pull a classic Cinemaholics move, talk about none of them, and talk about some other random movie we didn't even know was coming out.
Sure. I mean, I'd love to talk about R if you are willing to see it.
Yeah, you sound like a pirate.
R.
All right, that'll do it for our show this week. Don't forget to connect with us on the social media apps if you want to talk to us directly, or email us, cinemaholics@gmail.com. Check out our Patreon if you want to support us and help keep our lifestyles in check. Humble us, please. And we'll be back next week from the Internet California. I'm John Agroni.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.